Hey folks, happy Wednesday. We're doing our first video lecture today on Chapter 1. It was good to see you all on Monday. Again, just want to remind you that this is a lecture to just supplement what you've read in the textbook and some of the videos that you've watched. And so if you have any questions on this, you can either email me or call me, or you can feel free to wait until our next live session and you ask those questions then. We're going to go through the chapters, particularly the videos here, pretty quickly. I don't want to take more than about 30 minutes. And then, again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. But let's get started. So our learning objectives, what we're going to pull out of this today, we're really going to discuss what's important to be successful in business. We're going to define business. We're going to talk about measuring economic performance. We're going to examine different phases in the business cycle. We're going to talk about, what's going on in business today in the U.S. And we're going to talk about resources as well that you have access to. And so let's get going here. First thing, why do we study business? I think it's important first and foremost because I am the director of the Career Center, and it's my job to help guide you on the path to understanding your calling. I think you can use business to help choose a career. Again, we're going to cover different functions in business: marketing, finance, accounting, HR, entrepreneurship, management. And then you're going to be able to take that information and hopefully make a more informed decision on maybe what a good career is for you in business. And so we'll talk about that. It's going to help you be a more successful employee. The more you understand about business, the better employee you'll be. We're going to talk about diversity and how diversity does improve a business, make a business stronger, whether that's diversity in race, ethnicity, gender, or just different mindsets, different opinions in business. It does really help make it stronger, and it creates a better culture. It's going to improve your management skills. Understanding business will definitely make you a better manager. It'll help you start your own business. It's important to understand how to create a budget, how to market yourself as an entrepreneur. And so that's going to be important. And then finally, just to be a better and more informed consumer and investor. I talk to my students all the time about what they're doing for investing, and they always tell me, hey, we're on Robinhood and we're investing. And I ask them, how do you pick the stocks that you pick? And they really can't give me a very good answer until we talk about finance, until we talk about financial statements and how you use the different ratios, like debt to equity ratio, to understand what's a company worth investing in. And so that will definitely help if you understand business to be a more informed consumer and investor. It also really understanding business, studying business, and getting a degree in any degree, but a degree in business, it definitely creates more of a return on your investment for sure. The salary disparity between a high school graduate and somebody with a bachelor's degree is pretty large. And so that's something that we don't often talk about, but we should. What is a business? A business is the organized effort of individuals to produce and sell for a profit the goods and services that satisfy society's needs and wants. I need transportation, but I want a Mercedes. I need a computer, but I want a MacBook Air Pro. And so most of the time when you fulfill a society's wants, like we do here in the U.S., because we do consume a lot, you make a greater profit. That's just real. And so if you sell people what they want as opposed to only what they need, you're going to probably make more money. Now, we do need to satisfy those needs, but in the end, you're going to find that you can also satisfy their wants, and that's just part of doing business. Resources. This is going to be an important topic that we talk about through the entire semester. The 4 resources that you use to combine to make an effective business and a successful business are human resources, Those are the people that work for you and work alongside you. Informational resources, that's Google. Those are financial statements that you can use to make effective business decisions. Material resources. Material resources are, lumber, steel, machinery. Those are the things that we use to get what we need done. And then financial resources. Those are loans, or those could be monies from angel investors or venture capital firms. Okay, this is the money that we need to keep our business going or to even get it started. Factors of production. We don't produce a lot here in the United States, but I still want you to understand what the factors of production are, right? First and foremost, you need land and natural resources. You have to be able to put your manufacturing facility somewhere. And then you need water, you need, lumber, you need steel, you need oil to build and to maintain that facility. You need labor. You need people actually working the assembly lines. You need people managing those people. And so labor is a big part of the factors of production. And then capital. You need money. You need facilities. You need equipment. Without them, you just don't, you don't get anything manufactured. And so even though, again, we don't manufacture a lot here in the U.S., and for good reason that we'll talk about as we continue through the semester, it's still important to understand those, because we do have manufacturing here in the U.S. and in San Diego. We've got biotech companies here in San Diego that manufacture. We have defense contractors that manufacture here in San Diego. And so there is some of that here. Entrepreneurship, being an entrepreneur, that's somebody who takes a lot of risk to start a company, to be, an effective contributor to the economy. I respect entrepreneurs a lot, and a lot of my students wind up being entrepreneurs because they risk. It's all about risk. It's all about understanding risk, and you're never going to eliminate risk, but mitigating it. Limiting your risk is important. So how do you do that? You gain information and you make effective decisions based on that information. And so we're going to talk a lot about this as well. The different types of businesses, right? There's three. There's service businesses. Those are companies like law firms or hospitals or tax services like H&R Block. Manufacturing businesses, companies that build things, make things, like Intel is a perfect example. And then marketing intermediaries. Those are companies that actually buy, produce goods, and resell them. Sony's a perfect example. Billabong, Apple, Target, Nordstrom. They buy product and then they resell that product. E-business was big even prior to COVID. Amazon didn't get to be a $100 billion company for nothing. People found it much more convenient, much easier for them to purchase online. And so e-business has grown, ever since, the internet came out, ever since the first eBay came out. People have found it easier to purchase online. It makes their day a lot easier. And so as we stepped into COVID, it's even greater now. Brick and mortar can't really be open. So how do you shop? You are going back to e-business, and it doesn't take a lot. It's the barriers to entry into an e-business are pretty minimal. Really, all you need is a computer and then an idea. I mean, I have students, freshmen, who come in every year and they have a great e-business idea, and I help them, kind of come up with, the things that they need to do to make that happen or connect them with people. And so, as we continue to move through this pandemic and as we continue to grow, we're going to find that e-business grows even more. Profit basically is the difference between your revenue, your sales revenue, and your expenses. So you take your sales revenue minus your expenses and you get profit. If your expenses are greater than your revenues, then you have a negative profit or a loss. And so this is one of the things we'll look at, particularly when we start looking at income statements in our accounting chapter. Stakeholder theory. That's where, so there's two different types of theory. There's shareholder theory, where it's more about the bottom line. It's more about creating wealth for the investors or the owners of equity in a company. That is shareholder theory. Stakeholder theory is about, let's look at all the people and all the things that are affected by our business, our vendors, our customers, our employees, the community that we live and do business in, the shareholders. Let's look at all 5 of these and let's see how we can serve all of them. If you look at companies like Whole Foods and Patagonia and Tom's and the Container Store, they practice more of a stakeholder theory, and they're all super successful companies, very profitable. And it's because when they focus on everybody, including shareholders, profits come, right? If you treat your customers and your employees with care and with respect, and you are fair to your vendors, then profits will come. We'll talk about John Mackey a lot, the former CEO, and he's a big stakeholder theory CEO. And he tells a story in one of his TED Talks in his book, Conscious Capitalism, about when he first started Whole Foods in Austin. They had a 100-year flood there, and the first Whole Foods got flooded out. And he thought he was going to go out of business. But lo and behold, because he cared about all the people that were affected by Whole Foods, and they knew they needed Whole Foods in that community, his customers rallied around him. His vendors rallied around him. The banks rallied around him. His shareholders came back and rallied around him. Everybody rallied around him, and they rebuilt that business. And, now it's, one of the most successful grocery chains in the country. And so that's stakeholder theory. We'll talk more about that. Here's that relationship: sales revenue equals expenses and profits, or sales revenue minus expenses equals profit. This I'm going to let you learn more about in your econ classes, but basically, how do we measure economic performance? Productivity, these are indices that we use to measure. So productivity is the average level of output per worker per hour. GDP is the total dollar value of all goods and services produced by all people. As your GDP fluctuates, so does your economy. That's basically how they measure the business cycle, is based on GDP. Inflation is a general rise in the level of prices, and then deflation is in a general decrease in the level of prices. Right now, because of COVID, you're seeing inflation when it comes to groceries, right? The food that you eat is inflated. A lot of restaurants have COVID tax added to your bill now, so they're inflating the prices for food. Conversely, the prices for airfare are decreasing. You can basically fly anywhere around the country now for almost next to nothing. And so air travel is much cheaper. Food prices are much higher. So you see some things inflating and some things deflating. And so inflation, again, is a rise in prices. Deflation is a decrease in prices. Other ones that are important: unemployment rate. Prior to COVID, I think the unemployment rate was about 3%. Actually, for most professional industries, it was about 0%. And now I think it's close to 15% unemployment rate in the U.S. A lot of those individuals are coming from the service sectors, tourism, salons, restaurants and bars, and so they're being adversely affected. Consumer price index, that's basically the charges of fixed prices for a basket of goods that somebody might buy in a community. And then the producer price index, that's an index that measures the prices that producers receive for their finished goods. These are all ways that we measure how we're doing within an economy. And so you'll learn more about those again in macro and micro. The business cycle, basically it's the recurrence of periods of growth and recession. It's generally has 4 phases: the peak, which is the top or the best time, they would say, or just the height of the cycle. The recession is basically the downturn. That's where you have 2 or more consecutive 3-month periods of declining GDP. And then a depression is actually more severe recession. And then the trough is the bottom. That's the bottom of the business cycle. Let me show you here what that looks like on a graph. So here's a business cycle from 1972 to 2017. And as you can see, the red is the business cycle, and it's just kind of going up and down and up and up and down. And there's no set timing. It's not, some people say it happens every 10 years, every 5 years. Really, it's based on, what's happening potentially in the world. So here in 73, we had our first oil crisis, and that caused a recession, that caused a dip in our business cycle. And then we came back up, and then our second oil crisis dropped it back down. And then we came back up, and then we had Black Monday, which was the lowest loss in stock market history, and that dropped us. And then we moved back up, and then moved back down, and we moved back up to the dot-com crash, which took us down again in 2000 until we got to the great financial crisis of 2008, which really tanked our economy. And so we've been recovering ever since, and we've held pretty steady throughout then until now. We are definitely dipping into a recession, though it's kind of a weird one, because the stock market kind of rises and falls with the business cycle. Stock market right now is still seeing all-time highs. And so I don't know what it closed at today, but I think it was still right around 26. And so this is definitely an interesting recession, because there's jobs out there, there's people that want to work. It's just because of the pandemic, we can't put those two together. And so because of that, we're seeing a dip, and we're seeing it's a strange time right now. And so we're going to see what happens in the next few months. Particularly, again, they're hoping for a vaccine, and maybe that'll mitigate some of this, and we'll find out if our economy is going to recover quickly or not. So we'll see. Some people thought that we were already at a peak going into 2018, 2019, and then we were going to come down. I guess it just depends on who you're talking to, and yeah. Here's another example. Basically, if you look at this, there's a couple of different parts. Here's the trough in 75, and then we had recovery. Recovery is when, we're obviously growing, we're doing things to help the economy grow. And then expansion. Actually, this is probably the best time. Expansion is when, companies are hiring, people are working, consumer confidence is high, people are spending money, putting money back out into the economy. This is a great time right here. You hit the peak, and then you drop, and now here's your downturn, and then you've got the green here is the repair. We look at, the Fed looks at monetary policy. It looks at, adjusting interest rates to help us recover. And this is where we start to repair. And as we, repair enough, we hit the trough, and then we start to build back up again, and we start to recover. And then again, once we hit this, this certain threshold here of 50%, we start to expand. And so this right here was a great opportunity for expansion here. And then we hit a peak, and then we drop. And so this was 2008. We dropped. We did a lot to try and recover. A lot of different economic policies, particularly as it relates to interest rates. And then we started to recover, and we were expanding 2015. And really, we were continuing to expand all the way through 2018. And then 2019, 2020, this hit. So, yeah. So, but basically, that's what it looks like. It's a pretty chart. We're going to talk about charts and graphs a lot as it pertains to your final presentation. A chart says a lot more than words. Different competitions. You can go over these in your book, but perfect competition has many suppliers and firms. Agricultural products, a lot of farmers out there. Monopolistic, there's many business firms and suppliers. Clothing, shoes, those are perfect examples. A lot of shoe companies, a lot of clothing companies, a lot to choose from. Oligopoly is there's very few suppliers. There's very few car manufacturers now, cereals. And then monopoly, there's one. Probably the best example of that right now would either be Amazon or maybe Google. And so usually you can see these are software companies or utility companies, such as PG&E or SDG&E. Business today, it's crazy, right? So we're living in a really crazy world right now. And so, when we talk about standard of living really is very subjective. And even though we're in a downturn potentially right now because of COVID, there's still people who have a pretty high standard of living. And standard of living is based really on, our wants and needs. Are these being satisfied, and how are they being satisfied? I always do, the best way to understand this is comparison. My standard of living is going to be completely different than Jeff Bezos's standard of living. Okay? I don't need as much as him, or I don't want as much as him, potentially. And so, our standard of living is different. I'm very happy with my standard of living. He probably wouldn't be happy with my standard of living. And so, basically, that's what we're looking at right now. And for a lot of people now who are virtual working from home, maybe their standard of living has gone up because now they can spend more time with family, spend more time around the house, and still make money. Conversely, there are some people who have been furloughed or laid off. Their standard of living was such, and now maybe it's lowered. And so, so again, it's very subjective. The thing I love about our economic system as opposed to others, because we do really push for entrepreneurialism, because we do push for competition, we have a lot of, our system offers a lot in the way of solutions to a lot of the problems that we have. Even the COVID, we created competition between the pharmaceutical companies and partnership, but competition and partnership to create a vaccine, that'll get us through this. And so those are entrepreneurs out there who are starting companies. I think of companies like Zoom who allow us to do now the work that we do. I think of, remote thermometers, where you can just touch somebody and test their temperature. That's important nowadays. And so, I'm a big fan of the movie Robots. The saying there is see a need, fill a need. Right? And a lot of people are seeing the need for, again, e-commerce, for vaccines, for, remote working, and they're filling that need. And so our economic system here in the U.S., particularly because we are a free market, competitive economic system, we're creating these opportunities to solve problems. And that's really what we do. Again, the current business environment, it's competitive. You are no longer competing against people just in your community or just in your state or just in your country. You're competing with people around the world. Globalization has created this opportunity for people to compete against one another from, China, Central America, South America, Europe. We have to rise above. Average just doesn't cut it anymore, right? Even in education, there's a lot of international students that want to come here to the U.S. And so our students are competing with them as well for spots in our universities and colleges. And so the more technology grows, the flatter the earth will become and the smaller the business community will become. And so we have to compete with that. One of the things that you'll see in social media, it also creates an opportunity for more resources, right? We don't have to just rely on what's happening here in our local community. We can actually go out to different parts of the world to buy things and to get the resources we need. And so social media allows us to do that. E-commerce allows us to do that. Sharing ideas, sharing services. Some people are hesitant and they're afraid of, globalization. I think it's super important. and I think it is going to only make us better. Again, we have to compete more, but yet we have more resources now. And so we just need to make that happen and do a better job. We are called to be stewards of the earth, and so sustainability is another just topic that I love to talk about. It just makes good business sense to not deplete our natural resources. If we need wood and we're clear cutting forests, that's not good business. And so we need to think about that. How does that affect our economy? How does that affect how we now build homes if we don't have the wood because we've depleted it all? God, again, has called us to be stewards of our resources. And so we need to look at that when we look at our business plans. How are we going to take that into account? Okay. And we need to understand for our children's children, we need to effectively manage these natural resources, or we're going to lose them. And then where will we be? Okay. And lastly, just more challenges. How do we create a more stable economy and create new, higher quality, higher paying jobs? That's important, right? We've got a number of employees. Even though our unemployment rate was so low, many of those employees were working at minimum wage jobs. And so how do we take the underserved, lower income to the middle income, right? Middle class. And how do we take the middle class and get them to a higher level of earning, right? We need to think about that. We need to think about how we put people to work, and how do we pay them well. The national debt is a really sore subject for me. We're over $24 trillion right now in national debt, and it's growing. It just keeps growing. Again, are we going to leave that problem to our children's children's children? We have to look at how do we create social change and create these social programs that we absolutely need, right? We have to have those. Healthcare. Some people still need social assistance, and that's okay. But how do we do that in balance with understanding that we cannot continue to raise our national debt? And so that's a conversation that we absolutely have to have. And we have to figure out a solution to that, or it's going to come back and it's going to haunt us for years to come. And then again, how do we preserve the benefits of competition, particularly as we continue to grow globally? We have to be able to compete. We have to allow people to compete in business because, again, small businesses. You'll see in our next lecture that here in San Diego, 75 to 80% of the companies here in San Diego are small businesses, right? And they're competing. And again, many of them, the salons, the restaurants, can't even work right now. They can't even be in business right now because of the pandemic. And so we have to make sure that they stay in business, because that competition, between small businesses, it does help our economy grow, and it does make us a stronger country, right? Small business has always been the backbone of our country, and so we need to make sure that stays in place. And then how do we conserve, again, our natural resource? We got to do that. I think that's it. Yes, it is. So, again, 28 minutes. I'm trying to keep it right at 30 minutes. Really do appreciate you all. I'm so excited that we got through our first week. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to, pick up the phone or have a Zoom conversation with you. You can email me. Again, think about this slideshow. Think about the questions that you have as it relates to Chapter 1 or just business in general. And we can talk about that in our next live section. Have a great week. And thanks again for an amazing first week of class. And we will talk to you soon. Take care, folks.